How are you, darling?
Oh, hi, Marge. Look, I'm sorry I can't talk right now. I'm busy contemplating.
That's all right. I'll wait.
It's just that if I... Oh, never mind. Sorry.
Oh, please don't stop on my account. Unless, of course, it's something I shouldn't hear.
It's not that. I've just been thinking about the last few months. You know, everything God has taught me. I'm questioning finally making some kind of project about it. But I guess you wouldn't want to hear about it.
Oh, there you go. You're wrong again.
You really want to hear about it? Hey, maybe you'd even like to be in it.
Well, thank you. I really wouldn't mind.
Great. It's just that it's a pretty crazy story.
That's for sure.
What if people just think I'm making it up?
This is fact. I was right there. I'm an eyewitness.
Yeah, well, I know all of this stuff really happened, but I don't know. I like keeping to myself. I'm a very private person. It's probably a dumb idea anyway.
Well, I wouldn't be quite so polite if I were you, dear. I mean, time marches on even for you.
People will think I'm silly.
That attitude, you could find yourself a very lonely woman.
Yeah, well,
I don't hear you denying it.
I guess I could put myself out there, but what would people say?
Aren't you intrigued even a little bit?
Okay, you've got me there. I really am dying to tell this story. I just wish I knew how to go about it. I mean, it feels like such an undertaking. Ugh.
Don't bark at me, will you please?
Okay, I'm sorry. What have you been up to?
I'll tell you over lunch. What do you say? Chinese?
Wait a minute, Marge. I just got a great idea how to pull this whole thing off. I'll talk to you later.
Indelible.
Webster's dictionary defines the word indelible as cannot be removed, washed away, or erased. The last few months have definitely been that. Hi, I'm Amy, and I have a story to tell. Let me start by saying, what you're about to hear will sound a little crazy. I know there are people out there who will fully understand where I'm coming from, and there are going to be people who can't relate to me a single bit. I'm not here to convince you of anything other than the fact that when God sets something in motion, there's absolutely no stopping it. Like for many other people, God has changed my life. And as odd as it may sound, He's used somebody who I've never met and didn't even know about until 4 years ago to play a part in it. The uniqueness of the situation is what has prompted me to make this video. God is so creative, and though I've known for years just how much He cares about me, I was never so bombarded with that fact than lately. The main impression I've gotten from this well-crafted, intricate journey I've been on is that God cares. These last few months have incredibly improved upon my relationship with the Lord to an extent I just can't keep quiet about it any longer. And I must preface, though I will be talking a lot about a specific person in this video, Marj Dusay, she is not the point. God is the point. He's clearly been molding the story, might I assume, years before I was even born. There are just too many lines all narrowing to the same point, that point being God's perfect timing. I honestly don't know why God chose to work in this way, but you're just going to have to hear it for yourself.
I just wish you could have been there.
Let's get into the indelible stuff God's been doing in my life, starting all the way back in the year 2020. The year 2020 brought a huge change for the world. The global pandemic caused people to lose their lives, their loved ones, their jobs, their social interactions. Though I ended up quitting my job at the time for other health-related reasons, the social distancing really affected my mental health. My anxiety spiked during that year of isolation, and I became more withdrawn and fearful. Another occurrence unrelated to me at the time happened that year as well. On January 28th, actress Marj Dusay passed away at the age of 83. At that time, I wasn't aware of Marj or her career, not consciously anyway. I ironically didn't end up noticing her until September of that same year, through a 2-part episode of Barnaby Jones titled Final Judgment. I was instantly impressed by her talent and had vague memories of her from other media I'd seen before. I made a mental note of her, tucking her into the back of my mind.
Barnaby, would you forgive me?
For what?
Well, for not trusting you and for all those terrible things I said.
Flash forward a few months later, and I ended up spotting Marj Dusay in a couple episodes of Murder, She Wrote. Those sightings causing me to add her to my long list of favorite performers.
I would like to sit down with her sometime and have a nice long talk. See, my analyst feels it would benefit both of us.
I also used to have an unhealthy mindset when it came to my love for TV. You can hear more about that in my testimony video here on my channel. I would dive into a star's career and really put them on a pedestal. I got to where I could recognize the kinds of people I would undoubtedly become a mega fan of. I quickly picked up on Marj being one of those potential people. I actually listened to my intuition for once and just casually enjoyed Marj when she'd pop up. I do know that nothing over the last year would have been able to happen if I hadn't heeded what just might have been the Holy Spirit keeping me from messing up a good thing. Over the next couple of years, Marj kept resurfacing in my life, whether in something I randomly watched or in connection to the other stars I was invested in. For instance, one day in August of 2021, I was watching an episode of a short-lived 70s show called The Immortal. The last episode of the series, My Brother's Keeper, starred Marj, much to my delight.
Your blood regenerates. That's nonsense. Immortality. Jason, do you realize if it's true, it means that I'll just keep getting older while you stay young?
That same day happened to also be the day I got a call from my local license office I had very reluctantly applied to, saying they wanted me to come in for an interview. From that day, my short-lived stint at the license office and Marj Dusay has always been connected, but more on that later. Something similar happened in August again, though this time in 2023.
Indelible.
Since 2019, I've been self-publishing Christian fiction books through Amazon. If you're interested, you can check them out through the link in the description. I learned long ago I don't get to choose the topics I write about or the characters in the books. That's all God's department. I don't even get to choose when I write a book. So when those book vibes come around, I keep my eyes peeled. Usually it starts with an idea for a plot, followed by what I call character inspiration. Imagining my book characters as real people has always helped me see my stories better in my mind's eye. And even there, God doesn't stand by the sidelines. I always say He picks the people He wants to influence my book characters, and it's so true. That's what happened in August of last year, 2023. I was getting strong book vibes to write a story about something I've been yearning to do for years. This story was to be about an actor who struggles with his homosexuality and eventually is diagnosed with HIV. The book has not been published yet at the time of filming this video, so I won't give any spoilers, but the story's humble beginnings started while watching an episode of The Streets of San Francisco. On August 19th of last year, the episode I watched was In Case of Madness, starring another one of my longtime favorites, Cassie Yates. The seed was planted in my mind then. I'd love to write a book with Cassie as character inspiration someday. I'm not sure how my story idea and a character inspired by Cassie Yates collided, but it did. Great. I had a daughter character in mind. Now what? 8 days later, I was watching an episode of Heart to Heart titled Too Close to Heart. I was quite excited to see Marj Dusay in the cast, and the idea soon followed that her character would make a great mother in my hypothetical book.
Oh, they are making it so easy for us.
I just needed a father to round out the family. Out of nowhere, I felt urged to use actor Doug McClure, someone I hadn't really seen much work of up to that point. I didn't question it, however, and these nameless characters circled around in my head. I was also leery to undertake this book since the subject matter is so controversial. Then came August 27th. It was a Sunday, and the night before was horrible. I ended up only getting about 5 minutes of sleep before church that morning. I quickly blamed my restless night on spiritual warfare. I think I was right. There was a lot that God revealed to me in church that day, the culmination of things prompting me to undertake this book that felt bigger than myself. Though I didn't know it, that day would become what I have consistently looked back on and remember as the day God flipped my world upside down. Doesn't sound like much to begin with, but hold on. Over the process of writing my book, I stumbled across quite a few coincidences that further convinced me my books don't just come out of thin air. For instance, I ended up learning Cassie Yates worked alongside Marj Dusay in 1989 in an episode of Murder, She Wrote titled Test of Wills that I had seen before but had completely forgotten about up to that point. Marj had also starred alongside Doug McClure in a Disney film in 1983 titled Strange Companions. The odd similarities between my book and things that had happened long before I was even born kept coming together. In my book, a soap star winds up with an HIV diagnosis, and in 1993, sadly, Marj Dusay's son Randy passed away from AIDS. I had also named a character in the book Debbie without realizing Marge's real-life daughter was named Deborah, and I even named a church in the book Guiding Light Church, having no clue up to that point that Marj had a recurring role on the Guiding Light soap during the 90s and early 2000s. I didn't even know Guiding Light existed, but you'll hear more about how God ended up using that show later on. At the time, I had no plans of delving any further into anything Marj Dusay related. After all, I had held this sense for a few years that submersing myself in her career was probably not the best idea. But God had other plans, and I'm so glad.
Absolutely! Indelible.
Later that same month, I decided to watch a 1971 episode of Mannix that Marge was in titled A Gathering of Ghosts.
Oh, welcome to the reunion, darling.
Reunion? That's right, Joe. All the ghosts are here.
I had even used Diana Muldaur as character inspiration in my book, so the fact that she and Marge had starred in something together further prompted me to watch. I have to say, after that, I was hooked, and I began going through Marj Dusay's list of credits, no longer feeling the same trepidation about her as I had before. I began watching something of her every day, though I found myself growing somewhat sad that I had nobody to share my enthusiastic finds with. You see, my family likes TV, but they've never been as passionate about it as I am. And though I have amazing online friends that I relate to, I've struggled to build genuine friendships with others around me. The night of September the 14th, I was feeling especially down. I had already planned to watch the infamous 1968 Star Trek episode Marge was in titled Spock's Brain the following day, and was actually bottling my excitement about how much I was enjoying going through her career.
Brain and brain, what is brain?
Sure, I'm an adult, I could have talked about it with my family if I really wanted to, but from an early age, I kind of developed a sort of defense mechanism of keeping my interest to myself to prevent getting my feelings hurt. When I was a kid, I was so open about the things I loved, only to be met with disinterest and sometimes mocking comments from my own family. I felt I had nobody to talk to, which left only God. The night of the 14th, I remember being in my room and, as silly as it may sound, crying as I talked to God about my enthusiasm in rediscovering an actress whose work was really interesting to me. Despite my loneliness and the fact that up to that point I truly hadn't cultivated much of a relationship with God, I knew He cared about me. I just had no clue at the time to what great lengths He was going to go to prove that. From that day forward, I chose to hope God was all ears concerning my current interest in Marge's career, and instead of trying to find the human connection that always seemed to evade me, I ended up actually building a friendship with Jesus. The purple-clad Kara from that Star Trek episode has become somewhat of a symbol of the fact that God cares for me in a way nobody else ever has or ever will. Of course, as for many Christians in their walks of life, there are going to be attacks from Satan who wants to distract from and destroy the good God is doing. During this time, I began hitting a stumbling block I had dealt with before concerning what I call the comparison trap. We all compare ourselves to somebody else, and for me this time it was Marj Dusay. Oh, I'm not pretty enough, not acceptable enough if I don't live up to this unreachable expectation. Though I knew the thoughts in my head were nothing but whispered lies, they badgered me nonetheless. However, God continued on with His plan to transform who I had unfortunately become as a person. Moving on to September 16th, in a particular TV episode starring Marj Dusay that God has actually used multiple times in the last few months to mold me. The 1969 Hawaii Five-0 episode, The Singapore File. You're going to hear me talk about the Singapore File a lot during the rest of this video. But for now, let's start at the beginning. On September 16th, I watched for the first time the Hawaii Five-0 episode, The Singapore File. I'll give you the basic plot. A few months prior in the story's timeline, Nicole Wiley witnesses a murder and refuses to testify out of fear. She ends up running away and going into hiding to protect herself. Only when she has nowhere else to turn does she call in McGarrett. Wanting to put this killer behind bars, Steve McGarrett flies to Singapore to meet the frightened Nicole. Through their journey back to Honolulu to have her testify, she has to come to grips with her own fear and face what's been terrorizing her for so long. The first time I watched that episode, I was feeling especially down already. I still hadn't been able to find any steady work since quitting my job in 2020. I was doing freelance graphic design, but that's about it. Yes, I was self-publishing books, but that didn't bring in much of an income. I felt like such a failure. And watching the Singapore File and hearing how Nicole was just beginning to look inside herself and consider taking some steps of confidence convicted me.
You know, I've been running so long before this murder even. I don't know if I can stop.
That's up to you, Nicole. Try looking for yourself. The real you?
Maybe that's what I've been running from.
Then stop the running and face it. It's what we've got to do, all of us eventually.
I knew one of the major reasons I was leery of getting another job was fear. I'd had a negative experience at my past 2 jobs. Of course, God didn't let my unemployment go to waste. I was able to write and dabble in video editing with the ample amount of free time I had. I knew that was my true calling, yet I needed a job in the meantime, and that started with confronting some of my shortcomings. After finishing the episode, I prayed even harder about what steps God wanted me to take, and I had the suspicion a new job might soon be around the corner. Things like that have happened to me before. Something significant happens one year, and the next, around the same time, a similar thing happens again. And since I had already related my last job at the license office with Marge, and the fact she was becoming a prominent part of my daily routine, made me keep my eyes peeled for what God might be doing. During this time, I started making video edits as I moved through Marj's various roles. I ended up beginning an Instagram page to share them called @Marj Dusay on Film, and I still regularly post there. I have to say, making these little edits only further encouraged me to pursue creating more visual content instead of just writing books. Though I was discouraged about where I was in my life compared to other 20-something-year-olds, I did find a bit of comfort in the fact Jesus didn't actually start his earthly ministry until his 30s. Not to mention, I found out Marj Dusay didn't even consider working in the film industry until she was in her late 20s.
Ham sandwich and coffee, huh?
Okay, I could put a pause on my existential crisis. I had some time. God has used his Singapore file multiple times to poke and nudge me over the last few months, but let's move on. You've seen a snippet so far of how God cares about the things we enjoy, how he involves himself in the hobbies and interests we have, but I've learned through this season that it's true, God cares about the areas that cause pain and discomfort too.
Indelible.
At the end of September, I got to watch the 1991 Mancuso FBI episode Racial Matters, where Marj plays an attorney fighting for the rights of a client who claims she was raped by a police officer.
Maybe we can really make a difference here.
Max.
Nick, that's what I will never forgive you for. You just turned and ran away.
I really enjoyed the episode, but there ended up being a line in it that kind of gave me pause. I go into more detail again in my testimony video, but back before I was living for Christ, I used to obsessively worry about my favorite celebrities passing away. You see, as a Christian, I believe what the Bible teaches about the afterlife. It says in Romans 10:9, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. The Bible also says those who choose not to accept God's free gift of salvation for our sins are doomed to an eternity in a literal hell. Back then, I was aware the majority of the celebrities I was fond of probably hadn't accepted Christ as their savior, which meant their souls would be eternally separated from God. I could not bear that thought, and like I said, I made myself miserable stressing over that fact when I was younger. But after I grew up a little, I no longer had those troubling feelings. I knew that whether or not they accepted Christ was their choice. I couldn't have made it for them. It really didn't bother me anymore, and I rarely ever thought about it. Until last year, when Marj became more important to me.
Please don't tune me out just yet. Believe me, I don't want to talk about this either, and I'm not trying to be morbid, just honest.
Though at the time of Marj's passing, I wasn't even conscious of her existence, her departure from this earth really began to bother me. I'm not sure of her personal faith, I don't know if she was a believing Christian or not. Just the unknown paired with what the Bible proclaims left me feeling rather melancholy. The character Maxine Littleton's comment,
Yeah, people in hell want ice water. Don't mean they're gonna get it.
brought to mind a grim reality that left me uneasy. That night, I was willing to accept the fact that it was just a situation out of my control and move on. But during my regular Bible reading, I found myself in Romans 9. The chapter just so happened to fit with what was really bothering me. It was like God was taking an extra step he didn't have to show he does care about me and the things that are important to me. For the sake of time, I won't read the passage, but it talks about God's sovereignty, how he can use even the people that aren't followers of his to bring him glory and help others. That just further gave me peace that I can have faith God has everything planned out even though I don't fully understand it. And that wasn't the only time that's happened. Multiple times since then, God swoops in with a comforting verse or a gentle reminder that specifically on this subject it matters to him how I feel. In what may seem like an unrelated incident, that following day I ended up watching an episode of The Hardy Boys that Marj starred in called The Disappearing Floor in 1977. While watching it, I slowly began to realize I had actually seen the episode before when I was a kid. The one thing I hadn't remembered was Marj Dusay being in it. That's just another instance of many where God allowed me to overlook Marj until the right time. Now you may say, Amy, she passed away 7 months before you even really discovered her. Doesn't sound like great timing to me. Well, I'd be inclined to feel that way too, but let's keep going. The story isn't over yet.
Indelible.
As the days went on, I continued to enjoy making edits for my Instagram page, even eventually getting a follow back from Marj's own daughter, Deborah Dusay, and a sweet comment. And during this time, other little God nods, as I call them, would happen. Such as, I ended up ordering a few 4x6 screenshots of some of Marj's TV and movie characters for my wall. I went through printing them online to have them mailed to me, but they ended up taking so long to ship, I just resorted to printing them at my local Walmart. When I finally did get the ones I ordered online about a month later, which actually cost me more, I realized the quality paled in comparison to the ones I printed in person. If they hadn't taken so long to ship to me, which I honestly complained a little about, I would have been stuck with some pretty poor quality pictures. Seems insignificant, yes, in the grand scheme of things, but it sort of felt like God was taking an extra step he didn't have to, so I could actually enjoy my purchase. Laugh if you want, but I've been seeing things with new eyes. I really enjoy having these photos on my wall to look at, them being kind of a reminder of God's kindness and friendship we were still, at the time, developing. I began incorporating more Bible reading even into my daily routine, and began talking to God like someone I could trust with not just my salvation or my fears, but the mundane things in my life nobody else seemed to care about. Things weren't perfect though. God was beginning to reveal to me some of my bad habits I needed to change. For one, my obsession with perfectionism. In November, I found this magazine article on eBay from 1993 that Marj had autographed. I ended up buying the article and was extremely excited, but I gradually began thinking about how the autographed article was signed to some random woman named Carolyn. Obviously, that will look a little weird displayed in my room since my name's not Carolyn, right? At least, that's what I began thinking. I started kind of freaking out, letting what I eventually realized was not having control over a situation mess with me. I ended up buying another autographed photo around that time that was simply signed Love Marj Dusay. There, nothing to nag me about that. But honestly, I still could not get over the fact the article was signed to some random woman. Before, I would have kept these silly thoughts to myself, but this time, as embarrassing as it was, I took it to God. I asked him to bring peace to my mind about it and thanked him that truly, he is the only thing that is completely perfect. Things aren't always going to go the way I want them to go. We don't always get to feel the way we want to feel. But the one thing I can always rely on to be the same and never changing is God. As odd as it may sound, the article kind of became another reminder each time I looked at it of that fact, and further revealed to me the problem I had with needing everything to be, quote, perfect. It honestly doesn't even bother me anymore that it's addressed to somebody I'll never know. I also realized during that time that, unfortunately, Marj was slowly becoming somewhat of a security blanket for me.
Always around when I need you.
No, it's just that when I am around, you think you do need.
As my past self had somewhat prophesied, I was beginning to grow dependent on watching something of her every day and feeling upset if that didn't always work out. I love having a routine, things remaining consistent, but I surmised that deep down in my reluctance to release my tightening grasp, I was afraid of losing Marj. I liked how things were, and I wanted them to stay that way, but I immediately saw it as another opportunity for God to use Marj to draw me closer to Him. Call it intermittent fasting, but I began a new routine where I'd fluctuate between watching something with Marj in it one day and the next doing something else. The same day I received my article autographed to Carolyn in the mail, God used the Singapore file yet again to change my mind on something that completely altered my life. That sounds dramatic, but it's true. You see, for years, for whatever reason, I got the notion in my head that I was going to die young. I eventually narrowed it down to dying at the age of 25, the age I am now, by the way. And I honestly believed that as if it were actually going to happen. I wrote out instructions in case I randomly died and my family didn't know what to do with my stuff. At the time, I didn't realize how depressed I was. I woke up every day feeling so sad and like my future was pointless. I thought I was being a realist, but on December 4th, while rewatching that Hawaii Five-0 episode, this particular scene hit me upside the head.
I wish I could really believe we're going to make it back to Honolulu.
Think positively, you'll make it.
I'll try. I will try. I don't know why I care about living so much, but all of a sudden I do.
You live. You go back, you'll testify against Velasco, and after it's all over, you live.
Promises, promises.
I never made one I can't keep, honey.
Really?
Really.
I believe you.
I began to see more of myself in Nicole Wiley. I picked up on how she was so down and pessimistic, constantly thinking and accepting she was going to die before she was able to testify. Steve saying, "You'll live," and "You've got to be more positive," to her negative outlook just showed me how I've been the same way for a few years. After the episode was done, I decided to surrender my belief that I was going to die soon to the Lord. Sure, I may actually die at 25, but I determined I was no longer going to accept it as truth. I was no longer going to live my life planning for my death. 25, the age I thought I was going to die. Now it's the age I've started living. That night, I found myself going through my Bible and happened upon a verse I had never noticed before. It's in Job 10, verse 12. It says, "You have granted me life and steadfast love, and your care has preserved my spirit." I truly have been granted life.
I just feel so lucky to be alive!
And so do I, madame.
Indelible.
You know a little about how God has used TV to influence me, to prompt me, and to reveal things to me, but I'm about to tell you the most outlandish way he's worked in that way to date. Out of nowhere, back at the end of 2023, I was knocked upside the head with a character who is the embodiment of everything I thought I no longer was and truly would still be without the Lord changing my life. This character is Alexandra Spaulding, and the TV show in question is none other than a 90s soap opera. Yes, you heard that right, a soap opera. By November, I'd managed to pretty much go through all of Marj's career, at least the available episodes and movies I could find. I hadn't, however, tackled any of the soaps she'd been on, and I was dreading even trying. Me and soaps have never meshed. However, as a completionist, I wanted more to add to my growing list of checked-off boxes when it came to her performances. I managed to suck up my distaste of soaps and dive into the suds of Springfield, the fictional town and Guiding Light. I figured this soap would be just as cheesy and over the top as they come, but I was quickly proven wrong. On November 4th, 2023, I begrudgingly began watching Guiding Light through reruns on YouTube, starting with the end of 1993, just as Marj Dusay made her debut as Alexandra Spaulding. I was instantly surprised that, though Marj only had a couple of scenes in the first few episodes, I was already getting attached to the characters and involved in interwoven plotlines. The characters were just a bunch of nameless strangers at first, but I found myself tearing up when Harley Cooper got married and immediately adoring the feisty Lucy Cooper, who dropped into town about that time. Not to mention, Guiding Light was actually a funny show and not as completely zany as I thought it was going to be. Another shock to me was the gradual realization that there were certain attributes in Alexandra Spaulding that were looking a bit familiar. In a nutshell, Alexandra is a type A personality, a woman who loves control, harbors a lot of bitterness and resentment toward those who she thinks has wronged her.
I'm just not the sort of person that turns the other cheek. I'm more the kind of, an eye for an eye type.
Somebody impulsive, can be quite selfish, and deals with a lot of pride.
I'm sorry.
I think Alexandra's only saving grace is that she's played by Marj Dusay. In the beginning, I noticed a lot of what I thought was my old self in Alex.
Just keep in mind what I've told you.
What, about being a spoiled brat?
That, too.
Before Jesus changed me, I was a very angry and vengeful person. I was headstrong, loved getting my way, and had to be in control. I loved holding grudges and saw no problem with reacting in spite. I thought God had dealt with me and healed me of the majority of that, but I would start to find out that in reality, I was a lot more like Alexandra than I'd like to admit. This was just a funny thing I found online, but you get the picture. Before I go on, let's go over a little Guiding Light lore, so I'm not speaking complete Greek to you. Alexandra Spaulding was once married to Roger Thorpe, though they divorced, and in 1993, Alex and Fletcher Reed began dating. From another relationship, Alex had 2 sons, one of which is Nick McHenry. Later, Nick gets married to Melinda Mindy Lewis, who Alex despises for breaking up her marriage to Roger. Alex also has a brother named Alan Spaulding, whose son, Alan Michael Spaulding, is a part of Spaulding Enterprises. There are many other characters, too many to name, but this is your brief introduction. Over the following months, as I continued watching the show, Alexandra Spaulding became like a mirror to me.
I look in the mirror, I see this wild-eyed, out-of-control person I don't even recognize. But I hear this bitterness in my voice. You know, that scares me.
Though I wasn't seeking out symbolism or extra meaning through Guiding Light, for the first time I was seeing myself in a fictional character. I have to laugh because who else but God would use a soap opera to reveal to somebody ways they need to change? Buckle up because you're about to enter the world of daytime television. Earlier this year, I watched the episode that aired February 14th, 1994, and in it, Alex is forced to choose between dropping charges she pressed against Roger Thorpe or losing the loyalty of her son Nick.
Punishing him isn't going to make you feel any better. Well, that's where you're wrong, because I'm already feeling a whole lot better just contemplating the man's bleak future. You, knowing full well what he's done to me personally, you walk in here and ask me just to forget it all. No. Absolutely not.
Without really realizing it, the decision her character made started the wheels turning in my own mind.
Now, Alexandra, you have to drop your charges now.
I don't know what to say. Well, I can't do that. I can't. No, not even for Nick. I mean, let Roger off the hook just scot-free? No. Not after what that man's done to me.
And that is why you're so angry right now, because you have to decide whether hating Roger is more important to you than loving Nick.
I found myself intensely relating to Alex in a struggle that still remained for me, even though I thought I had put away all my grudge-holding tendencies. Realizing she'd rather have her relationship with her son intact, she lets go of the grudge she's been holding toward her ex-husband. I can't change what someone in the past did to me, but I was choosing to hold on to that pain and letting it eat me alive for no good reason. I'd chosen forgiveness, but I had yet to move on mentally. I enjoyed keeping back that little portion of bitterness that made me feel like the well-justified victim. Heavily convicted, I chose to no longer let the actions of others affect me. Right away, those feelings vanished. Through the big changes, there were still little God nods along the way, one being another purchase I made. While unemployed, fun buys wasn't really a regular thing for me. I did, however, start selling on eBay, which opened the door for me to start building my Marj collection. There was a listing on eBay of about 12 resume headshots that an agent or agency would hand out when Marj was looking for new roles. The lot also came with an autographed index card. I really wanted it, but it was out of my budget at the time. I ended up just praying that if God wanted me to add the lot to my collection, He would provide the money for me. Long story short, He did provide me with the cash less than an hour actually before the listing was about to expire. That was great enough for me, but only when I got the package did I realize that the lot came with her actual resumes too, stapled to the headshots. I had a piece of Marj history that I wasn't even prepared to receive. It again felt like God going the extra mile when He didn't have to. That also goes for what happened a few months later. I had no clue about another crazy addition to my Marj collection that God would unexpectedly knock all barriers out of the way for me to get my hands on. What makes it even crazier is that I hardly deserve any of this, especially not with the attitude I was starting to develop. I hit a humiliating realization hard the 1st of February, but I'm so glad God doesn't give us what we deserve.
Indelible.
On the 1st of February this year, I was feeling particularly irritable and apathetic in my walk with God. Satan had even been trying to convince me I was, quote, reading my Bible too much. Yeah, to put you in my headspace, I need to read you a portion of my journal entry from that night. It's so weird because Marj means so much to me, yet she'll never know I exist. I guess it's just another thing that points to the fact that God is the ultimate. He is the main relationship in my life. Sometimes Satan tries to trick me into thinking like I used to. I have to remind myself, oh yeah, things are totally not like that anymore. Sure, I think about Marj a lot. It's easy to think she's the focal point in that case, or anyone else for that matter. I love Marj to death, but she was her own person and I am me. That's another old record that tries to play in my mind, comparing my life path to Marj's when we're literally two different people. I know not to fall for it, but it's still there. The Marj is definitely super fun to be entertained by and was a really sweet, kind person, a fun person to learn about and look into. She is just a part of my life. She isn't the main thing or even comparable to that. I am so grateful for all God has taught me using her, but she is not something to put my hope and my dependency on because this train really does go nowhere. All I have of her is history, what was. My relationship with God is the main thing, and I truly think that perspective had gotten a little wonky. During writing down my thoughts, this was when things started to click for me. I really do feel so stupid. I know Marj isn't the end-all be-all. I know that. Yet I feel like I had kind of begun to treat her like she was. In all this writing tonight, I'm realizing a lot of my problem. On the days when I consume a lot of Marj, I feel really happy and upbeat. But when I consume less, my mood's not so great. I'm so glad God gave me the wisdom, though, to take those breaks and not constantly consume her on the daily. Even though I tried to be careful, I managed to trick my brain into thinking the only thing that could make me feel happy was seeing Marj. I just knew something was off today, especially during Guiding Light when Marj showed up and I thought, well, finally something to be happy about. Red flag for sure, and I knew it too. I feel so dumb. I guess it's just a part of being human. Marj will never be somebody I meet, will never be a friend, and she'll never know of my existence, but she truly has impacted my life. I totally see her as a gift, but that's all she is. She's a fabulous, wonderful gift, but she is not the prize. Something else God really impressed upon me during this time, though, was no matter how hard I try to do everything right, I'll never measure up. I'm always going to fall short of the glory of God because I'm a sinner, like everybody else. But the love Christ has for us is not based in what we do. It's going to remain in spite of the fact we're going to mess up and make the wrong decisions. I had to give up my ideas about being perfect. I've messed up since that day, and I will inevitably mess up again, but I'm so grateful God has already forgiven me for not only my past sins, but the ones I haven't even committed yet. I just have to keep showing up and being obedient to His word. The devotional I read that night even just so happened to fit my situation perfectly again. It mentioned Revelation 3:19-20, which says, "Those whom I love I reprove and discipline, so be zealous and repent. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him and him with me." I had been trying to enjoy the good fruits in my life God had given me without him, leaving him metaphorically outside the door. It had begun taking a toll on me in the way I had subconsciously started thinking of Marj as the highlight of my day instead of just a bonus. I have to say what happened a few days later really put my belief that God was the most important thing in my life to the test. It was a Monday, and I was randomly browsing Facebook. A while back, I began following a Marj fan page run by one of my friends, Janice Brown, and saw that another member had created a post. In the post, the woman explained about having been Marj's personal assistant for 11 years and that she was ready to part with a few items she'd acquired during that time. The lot consisted of a paperweight given to Marj at the wrap party for Guiding Light, a signed 35th Star Trek Anniversary trading card, a few autographed VHS tapes, a pair of slippers Marj had worn on Guiding Light that the studio let her keep, and last but not least, one of Marj's personal hats. The seller was asking $100 plus shipping. As you can probably imagine, I was super interested in this. The problem was, I only had about $60 in my savings account. I knew I'd never be able to afford it unless I managed to make some money off the things I had listed on eBay. That was admittedly a hard week. I forced myself not to check the listing on Facebook, figuring it was pointless because somebody else had undoubtedly already bought it. I did my best to not fall into complaining. I tried to keep a positive outlook, reminding myself of what I had just learned a few days prior. That Marj isn't the point, God is. Even though I did sell a couple of things on eBay during that week, I figured it was for nothing. I really didn't think the lot would still be around at that point. Funnily enough, Alexandra Spaulding managed to pop up again. In a scene from an episode that aired October 15, 1993, Alex makes the comment,
Are you saying that I don't have the serenity to accept the things I cannot change? If you do say that, you're wrong, I do.
That thought actually kept going through my mind during the whole painful waiting period. Did I have the serenity to accept the things I can't change? I sure didn't feel like it at times. Somehow, I continued to sell something every day, sometimes even multiple things in a day. By that Friday, I had $90 saved up. I finally went on Facebook to see if the lot was even still there. To my extreme surprise, it was. I ended up reaching out to the seller that night, asking some follow-up questions about shipping costs, even though I still didn't have the whole $100 yet. I said it could be a few days before I got the rest of the money, but wasn't sure. We kind of left it there. Suddenly, I thought, I could ask my sister to lend me the $30 more I'd need, and then I could pay her back, eventually. I messaged the woman again and asked if I could perhaps pay her a down payment of $30 until the rest of my money was deposited from eBay. I really didn't think she'd go for this unconventional way of doing business, but she surprised me. She said my word was enough, and if I thought I'd have all the money by around Wednesday, she'd keep the lot as pending so no one else could get it. That's not all though, there's more. Later that evening, somebody bought something else I had for sale on eBay, so God went the extra mile yet again. I got to pay my sister back and have some money left over. My heart had literally hurt for days thinking about somebody else getting the lot. It truly was not out of a possessive, idolizing place, but just because I loved the thought of owning some of Marj's things since she'd become so special to me. It was hard being a good sport and accepting God may not have this in his plans for me, but I really began to believe God wanted to give this to me, not because I've earned it or deserve it, but because he cares. I wish I could go back and tell my September self that, but then of course I wouldn't have gotten to see it with my own eyes. I ended up getting the money deposited to my account early and was able to buy the lot 1 week after first seeing the listing on Facebook. The woman even filled me in on a few other fun things about the time she spent being Marj's personal assistant. She was even kind enough to send me an extra VHS tape that had once belonged to Marj, the Mancuso FBI episode Racial Matters. Not only was it nice to receive that extra gift, but it's the fact that it's that specific episode, the one God used to comfort me a few months prior, that makes it all the more special. I can never be perfect no matter how hard I try, but thankfully God's love for me doesn't depend on my performance.
Indelible.
Time moved on, and if you can believe it, more strange occurrences kept popping up. Mainly with my personality complementing Alexandra Spaulding and events going on in my life matching things going on in Springfield. This is by no means a comprehensive list of all the times a scene in Guiding Light has fit perfectly with what I'm going through, but here are some of the highlights. Take for instance, a scene from the episode that aired June 10th, 1994. In it, Fletcher reprimands Alex for not being able to put her work aside for a moment and focus on something else for a change.
All day long, you play CEO Superwoman. Leave it at the office. You will find, my dear, that your personal life will be ever so much more tranquil, fun even. Terrifying thought, I know.
Am I not fun?
Look, you are queen of your realm. It is yours. No one is going to take it away from you.
I tend to be a workaholic, especially when it comes to things I'm passionate about. I have trouble pushing myself to the extent I get burnt out and completely fed up with whatever project it is that's consuming me for the moment. It was scenes like these, showing Alex's character flaws, that began making it feel a bit like I'd stepped into the Twilight Zone. Obviously, this character is fictional, yet her attributes are something I can really relate to. In the episode that aired June 16, 1994, Alex and her daughter-in-law Mindy managed to get into another argument that Fletcher interrupts. Instead of scolding Alex for her irrational behavior, Fletcher just stands there and lets her come to her own realization.
Okay, all right. I probably should have consulted Mindy before I started to have the room painted. I just thought it was a good idea since Nick was going to be away on assignment. All right. Nick probably doesn't give a hoot one way or another if that room ever gets painted. And I probably did it partly because of what Mindy did to me at Blake's wedding, but that's still no reason to try to destroy a precious piece of art. I will concede that maybe her throwing me into that little pond was an accident. And my painting the room this morning wasn't, but maybe I do owe her an apology. She certainly owes me one, too. So I'll go upstairs right now and say I'm sorry, okay? But she has to say she's sorry, too. Fine! Will that make you happy?
I didn't say a word.
But you know I hate it when you just stand there so quietly, expecting me to do the right thing.
Fletcher didn't have to say a word, just give a look, and Alex began confessing her true motives. To be honest, it's going to sound silly, but Fletcher instantly reminded me of the Holy Spirit in that moment. Just the way the Spirit works, other fellow Christians can relate to those gentle nudges God gives. Another thing Alex said was,
but she has to say she's sorry too.
And it reminded me of a thing I had read in my devotional that day. It was talking about how, though we may in theory want to love like Christ, we are basically selfish people. We want to do things to help others only if we get something in return. But Jesus wasn't that way. He gave and served, not expecting people to repay him. Doing things for others, knowing I won't get something back, is really hard for me. I quickly began to realize with the visual mirror of Alexandra Spaulding, perhaps God wanted to work with me on that. In the episode that aired June 20th, 1994, Alex's ex-husband Roger Thorpe drops by to give her some information about her brother Alan, who is currently in prison. Roger got inside her head, making her worry about her brother's intentions to take over her company, Spaulding Enterprises. Instead of keeping the plan she'd already made with Fletcher, Alex impulsively made the long drive up to the prison to check on her brother.
This little present from Alan bothers you, doesn't it?
Not in the least. What was it?
And I hear he's getting out this year.
Yes.
Well, obviously he spent more time thinking about us than we have spent preparing for him.
Can't this trip wait till the AM?
Probably. But I can't.
I again related to Alex's urge to push herself and do something impulsive like drop plans to get some peace of mind. I'll get some small nagging thought in the back of my mind and it won't go away until I do something about it. The way Alexandra thinks is so similar to the way my brain processes things. She's illuminated things in me I never thought of before. The things God was pointing out to me were real eye-openers. I began taking note of the way I was about to react to things or behave a certain way and being able to catch myself before I let my inner Alex out. I began recognizing how much of a control freak I really was. As I grew closer to God and kept in mind the things in my personality and attitude that needed to change, the Holy Spirit really took over. I began actually caring about other people, having a passion that I never had before.
You know, you're really scaring me. This is not like you.
No, I don't suppose so. Well, you're looking at a brandly new invented Alexandra Spaulding.
Going a little out of order, but at one point I was struggling with being bolder in my faith, especially face to face with people, no screen between us. During that time, God brought to mind Daniel in the Bible who continued to pray even whenever it was outlawed. Again, God paralleled what he was showing me in scripture with a guiding light scene. In an episode that aired December 5th, 1994, Alex heard that her brother is dying from an illness and being humbled by that, wants to make amends with everyone in her life. She goes to her friend Vanessa Lewis to give an apology for her behavior.
Well, when going gets rough, you know how to set aside individual differences. Bond together. Not only that, you're ready and eager to support each other.
You think so?
Yes, I do. Because I've seen it with my own eyes. Brings to mind a phrase that you'll know them by the way they love one another. That applies to your family.
Actually, that phrase comes from John 13:35. That following night, I opened my devotional book and saw I had evidently forgotten to read it the previous night. So I read both of the days. It was about how the Holy Spirit will give us words when we need them and encouragement to be more bold for the faith. The second devotion was about how, when we obey the Holy Spirit and have love for one another, His Spirit is evident in us. It reminded me of that verse Alex mentioned in the guiding light I'd watched the previous night. Being bold about anything personal in my life is quite difficult, but I want to live in a way that people aren't surprised when they find out I'm a follower of Christ. Of course, there is a certain safety in keeping to yourself when you know there's something else you must do. In an episode that aired November 7, 1994, the Spalding siblings are at it again. After serving his prison sentence, Alan does his best to convince his sister to sign over ownership of her company that is rightfully theirs to share.
But, Alan, I cannot let you twist me up in those little knots like you used to just to get me to do whatever you wanted.
I'm offering you peace. A chance to stop the pain, Alexandra. Don't you want that?
Oh, yes! With all my heart! But at what price, Alan? Because I know the minute you get any of your holdings back, I will have to give up every dream I have for my son. It will just have to be that way.
That is not true. We could share.
Oh, you don't know how, darling. You don't know the meaning of the word. Not as a boy and not as a man. In fact, the only thing you've ever been able to accept is getting your own way.
The scene shined a flashlight on more hidden corners in my psyche. I noticed that Alan was trying to gently push Alex to give in, promising her peace and security in return. She refused, however, knowing doing the wrong thing would not make things easier. In the sense, though she may get peace from him not pestering her anymore, she'd have to give up all she worked so hard for. The back and forth honestly reminded me of the peace and comfort Satan promises us in exchange for apathy and fear. If we let fear control us, we can remain without stress. But there is so much at stake in giving into that fear besides comfort. Though there have been many times in the last few months I felt Satan try to rope me into my old ways, what God has given me is worth fighting for. Here we go again with Guiding Light. In an episode that aired July 19, 1994, Fletcher met Alex at her yacht where she was about to throw out all of her nephew Alan Michael's belongings after he betrayed her and her company. Fletcher, of course, questioned her methods and suggested she may be going a bit overboard. She explained in very relatable terms how she's just trying to protect herself, to stay in control. Literally all the stuff I had been constantly reminded about myself.
I am more than a bit baffled by your reaction.
Really? Well, how is one supposed to respond to blatant betrayal?
You're taking it all too personally.
Oh, I see. I got it. I'm the one to blame for the knife in my own back, contortionist that I am.
No. What I'm saying is that you gave Alan Michael no choice but to go against you.
I'm running Spalding now. We're in very good shape. I'm in control. I don't enjoy doing what I'm doing to Alan Michael. I mean, contrary to popular opinion, I am not a cold, heartless person. It's just that I have to protect myself. My company. How do I know there isn't more, worse to come?
You don't? You don't. But you cannot ruin someone's life in anticipation of what they may or may not have hidden up their sleeves. It isn't fair. You can't do it, and even you know that.
But they could have been working together all along. For all I know, Alan could be running this whole operation right from his prison cell.
Or not.
Why didn't I learn that lesson? Alan and my father taught me, don't believe anyone who says they love you because they're going to kiss you on one cheek and slap you right across the other.
Though her character's main problem is revenge and spite, I can still relate so closely as to why she does things that it's scary. After watching that episode initially, I got to thinking, I need a Fletcher in my life to help me see all these things. Then, as God always does, He lovingly reminded me that I'd been able to learn all that I had the last few months by applying what He's already taught me, in albeit unusual methods, but also His Word. The day I start putting hope in any human to help fix me and solve my problems, I'm in trouble. It did become very intriguing sitting down to watch this soap and thinking, what is God going to teach me next? Though I can't really say I learned something from this other moment, it's still kind of fun. On Christmas of last year, it turned out that the next Guiding Light episode I was going to watch was the Christmas of '93 one as well. I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, I had skipped a few days watching the show, I wasn't sticking with the air dates. Yet it worked out for me to watch the Christmas episode on Christmas Day exactly 30 years after it aired. In the episode, the passage Luke 2, 1-19 was read over a montage. The verse they ended on during Alexandra's segment was verse 11.
And in the region there were shepherds out in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone round them, and they were filled with fear. And the angel said to them, Be not afraid, for behold, I bring you good news of a great joy, which will come to all the people. For to you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord.
In my devotional that night, that also happened to be the verse of the day. Of course, it was Christmas after all, yet it just felt a little bit like another God nod, just a reminder that timing is everything. Nothing goes beyond what God already sees. Though there are many more guiding light scenes coinciding with the different things I was going through, let's move on to something else that was going on in my life, starting with stepping back into the job scene.
Oh, yeah? Well, you ain't heard nothing yet, bud. Indelible.
As I've mentioned, the thought of getting another job genuinely frightened me. I had a bad fall a few years ago, which has left me with a few permanent physical limitations. That was one of the main reasons it was hard for me to find another job. Then came along an unlikely opportunity. There was a fast food restaurant that opened almost a year prior in my town, and my sister had already been working there a few months, so I was accustomed to her and the rest of my family trying to get me to work there as well. I honestly was not interested. I figured the labor would be too hard for me physically, and that they wouldn't even want to hire me because there wouldn't be much I could do. But in the middle of March of this year, my sister mentioned again how I should start working there. The last job I had was at the license office in 2021, and I had felt forced into applying. Though I really wasn't enthusiastic about this job, I prayed and asked God for wisdom. I knew I had to go into this venture with a positive attitude, find the good in this situation, and cling to it. So much had changed in my life over the last few months. I truly embraced the phrase, "we're doing things differently now." I got my interview set up for the following day, and God also found a way to make it a good teaching moment. Though I love guiding light as a whole, there are times when I grow impatient with the gradual growth of the plot and skip the episodes that Alexandra Spaulding doesn't make an appearance in. I realized that upcoming, there were 9 episodes exempt of Alex. I found myself instantly annoyed, even beginning to dread my interview the next day a bit more, knowing I had no guiding light to look forward to. It was an honest heart check. The gifts he dropped into my lap over the last few months are a great Novocaine, but they're not a permanent solution to a tough situation. I can see in hindsight that God has been planning to use Marj in my life since 2020. Sadly, she passed away that year, and I discovered her 7 months later. I also lost my job that year and began my 4-year unemployment, except for the license office job that I had always associated with spotting Marj Dusay anyway. The last few months, Marj has become more reoccurring in my day-to-day, and a new job was potentially on my plate. Call me crazy, but I really don't think all of that is a coincidence paired with everything that's already happened. Ultimately, I did get the job, much to my shock. During that time, I also began writing another book. As I've said, I tend to fixate on whatever project I'm working on and have a hard time letting it go when I have to. Though I didn't want to admit it, I'd also begun pushing my relationship with God on the back burner again. Then good old guiding light grabbed my attention again. After seeing the episode that aired August 31st, 1994, I wasn't looking for any kind of meaning, and in my first watch through, I had actually missed a lot because my mind was still in writing mode. But something about it made me watch Alex's scenes again later, and it all kind of made sense. In the episode, Alex is all excited about visiting her brother Alan in prison. Fletcher, of course, is critical because Alex has changed her tune. She was acting more excited about her brother, who treated her terribly, than Fletcher, her own partner.
Oh, come on, Fletch. Why are you trying to pour cold water over this?
On this warm family reunion? Because it's so much more than that, and you're knocking yourself out for it. You don't mention the man's name to me for months and months.
All right, Fletcher.
I want to make sure you understand how I feel about this visit.
I know. You just worry about my health.
Yeah, but it's more than that. You know, when you talk about Alan, your face changes, your eyes, you light up. I haven't seen this lively and animated for months.
Do I really?
Yeah, just the way some women get when they talk about their husbands.
Oh, come on, you're exaggerating it.
Maybe.
Oh, come on, Fletcher. I'm not going to sit here and let you think that I don't care more about you than anything else in the... Come on.
It reminded me of how excited I get about a book and how even though I'm trying to do the right thing, I often obsess to the point where I neglect my relationship with God because I'm so focused on doing that I can't put it away. I don't know if it was more of a Holy Spirit nudge than any real logic on guiding light's end, but it consistently pops into my mind now whenever I find myself sinking into a hole of hyperfixation. I vaguely mentioned the crippling anxiety I used to have. It had gotten so bad to the point I constantly felt like I had to control every breath or get sent into a panic attack. I was even terrified to simply walk anywhere. God often brought to mind one of the scenes in the Singapore File episode I've referenced a lot already.
Well, you did it. You put him away for good.
The first time I didn't run. I like it, Steve. A good feeling.
Despite all the fear I felt, I didn't want to run. I wanted to push through the anxiety, and praise be to God, things are much better than they used to be. After my first day of work, I really began having flashbacks to the bad job experiences I'd had in the past. Not because of anything happening at my new job, just fear of change, of something new. Then again, God seems to know how to get my attention. In an episode of Guiding Light that aired September 21st, 1994, things are changing for Alex as well. Fletcher actually breaks up with her a few days prior after realizing she'd been manipulating him in one of her schemes.
You think that you can wear these different masks for different purposes? You actually believe you can keep all of these people separate? Well, you can't, Alexandria. It doesn't work that way. You can't be one person at work and another person at home.
In the episode I watched that night after my first day of work, though, she's lying in bed with the curtains drawn,
Cataloging my sins.
when her son and daughter-in-law try to lift her spirits. In my journal that night, I wrote, I have emotionally felt on a roller coaster today, but good old Guiding Light. Tonight, it provided some clarity. Alex was all depressed because of Fletcher leaving. Her son Nick and his wife Mindy tried to remind her that life moves on. She then told him she wants to make a big leap and have him be a full partner at Spalding Enterprises. Nick then asked her if,
Alexandra, do you really think you can do this? Do you think you can let go even just a little?
I have to. For my own peace of mind, my own sanity.
He then reminded her that he and Mindy would be moving out soon too, and Alex said,
Well, of course you'll be leaving. Everybody leaves.
I feel like the stuff Fletcher has said in the past has been so eye-opening to me as a person, understanding myself better, and now he's gone. Alex is going through a hard change of routine. I suppose if she can give up control, I can too. Time marches on, things change. Maybe that's why I've been feeling like this, because I'm having to go through more change and get out of my comfort zone. The comfort is gone, and so is Fletcher Reed. It appears Alex and I are at a bit of a turning point. She's planning to fight, move on, and forge ahead, probably badly to be honest, but move forward nonetheless. Since, the beginning of this year, my life has sort of followed the Guiding Light plotline where Alex is concerned. So, though leaving the comfort zone and dear Fletcher behind doesn't feel good, it's happening and we just have to keep moving on. At least I have God and don't have to do it on my own power. I knew I didn't want to go back to the way things had been before, which meant letting go of my comfort zone and putting it in the hands of God. There was a time during the last few months where I contemplated, though never intending to go through with it, how things would be if I decided I no longer wanted to implement the things God had been teaching me. I realized if I did that, or just got to be that way gradually, Marj Dusay and anything she was involved in would mean very little to me. Though it may sound crazy, on the days I neglect to spend time with God, I really have no interest in watching anything Marj Dusay related. Like I've said, before God started teaching me all this crazy stuff, Marj Dusay was nothing more than one of the many celebrities whose work I admired. With God in the mix, it gives everything a whole new meaning.
Indelible.
Even with all of the incredibly crazy stuff God has been doing in my life through this season, there are times when I'm admittedly not very grateful. Take for instance my birthday of this year. My sister asked me what I wanted for my birthday. I sent her 2 reasonably priced things I'd found on eBay, one being another Marj resume headshot and an 8x10 glossy of Marj and Jack Lord in the Singapore file. I honestly was the most excited to get those things out of all of my other presents, especially the resume headshot since I had missed out on a different headshot on eBay that someone had bought before me. Except things didn't go exactly as I'd hoped. When I opened the present from my sister, I got the Hawaii 5-0 photo, which I liked, but there was no resume headshot. I tried to be grateful and show my appreciation, though I have to admit I was disappointed. I was even more frustrated when I got to looking closer at the Hawaii 5-0 photo and realized the seller had enhanced Marj and Jack's faces, totally ruining the picture for me. I found myself wanting to compensate by spending the rest of my birthday money on a couple of pricey press release photos I found online. I honestly was in a grumpy mood, felt like my birthday was a letdown, and I deserved basically to get something I could actually enjoy. Then that night, I watched another episode of Guiding Light, this one having aired October 21st, 1994, where Alex is trying to persuade her son Nick into making a risky business deal, one that could put his wife's family in jeopardy.
In the process of selling our products to them, you find it necessary to offer any of the Lewis Oil accounts, I hope you won't hesitate to do so.
If we take out Spalding accounts out of Lewis Oil right now, that could cost Melinda's family a fortune.
Only temporary. Any deal that can be made can be unmade down the line, especially after you're voted in as president.
Alexandra, what are you saying?
I am saying, darling, close this deal no matter what you have to do. It's vital to us, Nick, right now.
Again, it was another mirror moment. I saw myself so intent and determined to make an impulsive decision just to get what I want. It instantly stopped me in my tracks. I decided to wait on the expensive press photos. I sent an offer for way under the asking price, something I was more comfortable with, but I left it at that. The next morning, the seller accepted my offer for the photos at their reduced price, which was surprising. Not to mention, I realized when flipping through the headshots I already had that I already owned the one I thought someone had bought out from under me. A few days later, I even got the headshot in the mail I'd asked my sister to get me for my birthday. Turns out it wasn't with my presents because it just hadn't arrived yet. It made me feel guilty for quite a while, like I did not deserve getting everything I wanted. Especially because I had been privately acting like a spoiled brat about my presents, or the lack thereof. Well, it's true, I didn't deserve it, but that hasn't stopped God from continually pouring out his love for me, going the extra mile, and yeah, it's mind-boggling. Back in February, I became an admin in the Facebook group I mentioned earlier and have gotten to share the edits I make. I've even been able to converse a little with one of her sisters, which has been such a cool experience. I even got to be involved in a tribute to Marj on the Locker Room's YouTube channel a few months ago. That turned out to be a blast.
I want to say thank you to Amy Corbin, who shared a lot of videos.
I hope I can continue to be involved in keeping Marj Dusay's memory alive and help introduce her work to people who may not already be familiar with it. A couple of other random fun things are, as I've mentioned, I've always associated my brief encounter at the license office with seeing Marj on TV the day I got the interview for the job. While I found out later that at one point, according to an article from 2016, Marj had once had a job typing driver's license for the city, which I thought was kind of humorous. And only a few months ago, a photo listing of Marj from June 4th, 1984 went up on eBay. Upon closer investigation, I found the photo was taken on the same day at the same place where Marj had signed the index card I had gotten with the headshot resumes back in February. On top of that, this part of the outfit she was wearing is the same from her episode of Heart to Heart, the one where her character influenced my book that started me on this whole journey. This whole project is such a huge deal for me. I haven't even covered everything there is to tell because we'd be here forever. I honestly wasn't even going to start working on this project so early, but during the end of May, things began slowing down. That truly began about a month prior, where in the confines of Guiding Light, Alex was faced with losing Fletcher for good since he'd gotten involved with somebody else. In her struggle to let go and move on, I felt a shift in myself as well. On the episode of Guiding Light I watched that night, Alex again expressed to Fletcher that they really could make things work, but he set his foot down and said no, it was time for them both to move on.
We didn't work out, and no amount of effort would make us work out.
No, Fletcher, that's where you're absolutely wrong. We did. We were fine.
You don't remember all the fights. You don't remember all the times I walked out of here.
That's what people do when they care passionately about each other.
Or when they passionately want to kill each other. What the truth is that we can't change, and we shouldn't have to, Alexandra. We are just who we are, that's all.
Well, I can change.
Along with that, my devotional that night was very encouraging, about beginning new projects and seeking God's wisdom in the process. I also read in 2 Timothy 3:14, "But as for you, continue in what you have learned and have firmly believed, knowing from whom you have learned it." In chapter 4, verse 7, it says, "I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith." It felt significant to me. I also read in verses 16 through 18 that says, "At my first defense, no one came to stand by me, but all deserted me. May it not be charged against them. But the Lord stood by me and strengthened me, so that through me the message might be fully proclaimed." I genuinely couldn't have related any more to that verse. I was so alone, felt so deserted 10 months ago, but God stood by me. There are times where I would just really love to be able to sit down with Marj and share all of these things with her. I'm so grateful that, even though I'll never be acquainted with a lady who has so greatly impacted me, God has given me a few for keepsakes, and Marj Dusay will always be a reminder that if anything, God cares about me. At one point, I began to, somewhat jokingly, refer to her as my Ebenezer. If you look up what an Ebenezer is in the Bible, it says it comes from 1 Samuel 7, when Samuel was helped by God and set a stone that he named Ebenezer as a monument to remember God was his help. Though Marj Dusay has been on my radar for years, I never would have picked her out of a lineup of people God might potentially use in my life.
You snuck up on me.
I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to.
Yes, Marj Dusay really did sneak up on me, and I'm glad. I may end up looking like an idiot releasing this, but I don't care. But maybe you're not wallowing in pessimism and actually think all of this is pretty cool too. Maybe you wish God would be so evident in your life. Maybe you're even questioning where to start in a relationship with God. The Bible says it starts with confessing your sins, believing in the Lord Jesus Christ, and there you'll find salvation. I didn't have to say any magic words, do all the right things, or mark off some bullet points that brought along the events of the last year. God is just that good. As I've learned, God can use anything, even a soap opera from the 90s. Marj Dusay will always be an Ebenezer in my life. Seeing her will inevitably bring to mind what God has done.
We're going to celebrate hope for the future, mine and yours.